Beneath the glittering lights of the British monarchy, in the seemingly flawless rituals, lies a secret never spoken aloud. Queen Camilla and Princess Anne have never truly stood on the same side. Behind their joint appearances are glances as cold as steel, smiles that never quite reach the eyes, and silences long enough for the tension in the air to be felt. This is not a fleeting disagreement, but a conflict that has simmered for decades of battle without gunfire, yet powerful enough to make the walls of Buckingham Palace tremble. Whispers suggest it all began with a long-forgotten love triangle, back when both women were still in their 20s. Anne was said to have harbored feelings for Andrew Parker Bowles, the very man who would later marry Camilla. From that moment, an invisible rift formed between them. That rift only deepened when Camilla entered the life of Prince Charles, becoming the center of a scandalous affair that drew the world's gaze and, indirectly, pushed Princess Diana toward tragedy. The day Camilla was crowned, many saw it as proof of a love that had triumphed over all adversity. But for Anne, that moment was a bitter reminder the woman she had never truly respected now sat in one of the most powerful seats beside the king. From that day forward, their rift ceased to be a private matter and became a silent duel, one in which both women understood that whoever yielded first would be the one to lose. In the autumn of 2795, the British royal family found itself mired in controversy and upheaval. Reports of King Charles III's declining health, coupled with mounting public pressure over the monarchy's relevance in a modern age, had turned the atmosphere at Buckingham Palace stifling. Yet, amid the gathering storm clouds, a sudden beam of light broke through a story that would ripple across the United Kingdom. Peter Phillips, grandson of the late Queen Elizabeth and eldest son of Princess Anne, announced his engagement to Harriet Spurling, a gifted writer with a background in international media. The news swept across the country like a fresh breeze, sparking excitement among the public and the press alike. Peter, tall and rugged with the air of a successful businessman, and Harriet, with her radiant smile and glossy brown hair, quickly became the embodiment of a modern couple, one that needed no crown, yet exuded dignity. From the prestigious pages of The Guardian to the sensational headlines of the Daily Mail, the British press showered the pair with praise. They were seen as the face of a refreshed, relatable monarchy. One editorial noted the public, weary from recent royal scandals, seems to have found hope in this love story. Finally, a happy ending without the drama. Underneath, a reader had simply commented with a heart emoji, amid the wave of admiration for Peter and Harriet, another figure unexpectedly emerged as a quiet star, Princess Anne. The steadfast mother in the background was suddenly celebrated as the ideal royal parent. At 70, Anne, with her no-nonsense style, practicality, and lack of pretension, had long been the monarchy's silent anchor. She carried out hundreds of engagements every year, from equestrian events to rural support initiatives, never seeking the spotlight. But now the media was beginning to ask bigger questions. Could Anne be the rightful female figurehead for the monarchy in a new era? As the Times put it, Anne doesn't need a crown to shine. She is a symbol of resilience and dedication, the very qualities the monarchy needs to regain public trust. At her Gatcombe Park home, Anne read those words with a discreet smile. She was not one for fanfare, but the news of her son's engagement warmed her heart. Peter, her firstborn from her marriage to Mark Phillips, had always been her pride. She remembered the days when he was a boy, when she taught him to ride and to face life without relying on a royal title. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, embracing him after the announcement. Her joy, however, was tempered by a flicker of apprehension. She knew royal life was never free from unwelcome surprises, and not everyone shared in her happiness. At Clarence House, Queen Camilla sat in her private study, holding a copy of the Telegraph with a pensive expression. The bold headline about Anne irked her. Camilla, who had spent decades transforming her image from a vilified figure into an accepted queen, could not bear the thought of being overshadowed. Her lips tightened. Her fingers tapped on the oak desk covered in articles praising Anne. The public's affection for Anne was not a passing whim. It was a direct challenge to the carefully constructed image of the Queen consort. King Charles, her husband, was growing increasingly frail. His health problems had forced him to scale back public appearances, and whispers within palace corridors suggested he was considering asking his sister to represent the monarchy at major upcoming events such as the VE Day commemorations or international occasions. With her robust health and untarnished reputation, Anne seemed the obvious choice. Camilla felt a slow, simmering anger rise within her. "Why, Anne?" she murmured under her breath. What stung most was that Anne was not a youthful, glamorous figure like Kate Middleton, but a woman of the same generation, a rival Camilla had never imagined could threaten her. She rose from her chair, walking slowly to the window, gazing out at Buckingham's gardens turning to autumn. Golden leaves scattered on the ground seemed to mirror her unsettled mood. She thought back to the years she had fought for acceptance, enduring the public's disdain and the press's scorn. Now, finally secure on the throne, she could not allow Anne, that unyielding, understated woman, to steal her glory. An idea began to take shape in Camilla's mind. She would have to do something to break the tide of affection for Anne. Directly attacking her was impossible. Anne had virtually no vulnerabilities, but perhaps, through Peter, she could find an opening. "The royal family doesn't need a silent monument," Camilla whispered, her eyes glinting with resolve, "and I will not let her win." In the days following Peter's engagement announcement, the atmosphere at Clarence's house remained heavy, despite the weak autumn sunlight trying to pierce the gray London clouds. Camilla, having read every glowing article about Anne, could no longer sit still. She summoned a private meeting with her most trusted advisors, the same ones who had guided her through countless past scandals. In the study, with its dark wood-paneled walls and the faint scent of old books, Camilla took her seat at the head of the table, her sharp gaze sweeping over each face before her. She knew that if she was going to bring Anne down, she couldn't attack her head-on. Anne was simply too flawless, too discreet in the public eye. But Peter Anne's son was a softer target, a successful businessman. Yes, but still royal enough that any whiff of scandal would spread like wildfire. "I will not have Anne being hailed as some sort of saint," Camilla said, her voice low but brimming with resolve. Her fingers gripped the armrest of her chair, jealousy coursing through her veins like poison. "We need a story big enough to shake her image, and Peter will be the key. Look into his company, SEMG, and the international sporting events he's organized. There must be something questionable in there." The advisors nodded. Within days, they had unearthed information, not genuine proof, but enough to seed a rumor. Camilla ordered the whispering campaign Peter had supposedly embezzled sponsorship funds from a major sporting event run by SEMG. She never touched the matter directly, instead working through her network specifically. A former advisor Peter had once turned down for a sponsorship deal without explanation. "Let the press do the rest," Camilla murmured to herself in the royal bedchamber, gazing out over the autumn garden. A strange mix of satisfaction and unease settled over her. This was a dangerous game, but she had no other choice. If Anne's popularity kept growing, Camilla's own position could be undermined. And that she could never allow. Within days, a major tabloid splashed the headline across its front page: "Princess Anne's son accused of embezzling sponsorship funds." The story, peppered with vague but convincing details, claimed that Peter had siphoned off money for personal gain. There was no hard evidence, just insider sources and selectively edited documents, but it was enough to spark curiosity. Pictures of Peter and Harriet appeared alongside captions suggesting Harriet might have known about her fiancé's dark secret. On social media, the story went viral. The hashtag Peter scandal trended, interspersed with comments like, "Another royal scandal, and what will Anne say?" Buckingham Palace maintained a frosty silence, which only fueled the media frenzy. Paparazzi gathered outside private residences, cameras flashing, waiting for a statement. At home, Peter sat with Harriet, pale-faced as they read the news together. He gripped her hand, his voice trembling. "This is slander. Harriet, I've never done anything wrong. I know you." "Peter," she said, her voice firm though her eyes betrayed worry. "We'll get through this." Still, Peter felt a volatile mix of anger and fear rising in his chest. In the royal world, scandal could destroy you even if you were innocent. Meanwhile, at Clarence's house, Camilla watched the news on television with a faint, private smile. Power seemed to return to her like blood to a chilled limb. Yet deep down, a thin thread of anxiety pulled at her. Could this plan backfire? She dismissed the thought this was necessary to protect her position. The secret war had truly begun, and no one could predict the fallout. The autumn wind carried golden leaves across the grounds of Gatcombe Park. But inside Princess Anne, a quiet fury was beginning to burn. The smear against Peter was everywhere, and she felt it like a slap across the face. It wasn't just her son's reputation under attack, it was as if the years she had spent teaching him about integrity and responsibility were being mocked. Anne tightened her grip on her phone and called Peter immediately. In his London home, he sat opposite Harriet, worry etched into his face. Hearing his mother's steady voice on the line brought him a measure of comfort. "Mom, I swear I've never done anything wrong," he said, his tone shaking but firm. "SEMG has always been transparent. This is a setup. Someone's trying to destroy me." Harriet clasped his hand tighter, her gaze full of belief. "I know, Peter. Stay calm. I'll find out the truth," Anne replied. But beneath her composure was a cold determination, the kind of resolve a soldier feels before going into battle. Anne was not one for rash moves. She hung up, sat at her desk, and scanned the pile of newspapers with an unblinking eye. She knew royal scandals never appeared from thin air. There was always a hand pulling the strings. Drawing on her years of navigating the press and palace intrigue, she began tracing the rumor's origins. Quietly, without involving palace advisors, she reached out to someone she trusted, Jonathan Wells, an independent financial consultant who had previously audited SEMG's projects. Jonathan, a calm, middle-aged man, met Anne in a discreet cafe on the outskirts of London. In the quiet hum of the room, with the fire crackling softly, he placed a thick file in front of her. "I've reviewed every financial report from SEMG over the last 3 years," Jonathan said evenly. "Everything is clean. The documents the press are citing were deliberately altered. Figures were manipulated, and certain transactions were taken out of context to create a false impression." Anne nodded, eyes fixed on the pages. "Who's behind this, Jonathan?" she asked, her voice low but sharp as steel. Jonathan hesitated for a moment. "I can't give you direct proof, but there's something odd. One of the falsified documents traces back to a consultancy that used to work with Clarence's house." At the mention of Clarence's house, Camilla's residence, Anne pressed her lips together. A piece of the puzzle was sliding into place, but she wasn't about to jump to conclusions. She would need more proof. Back at Gatcombe Park, Anne kept pulling at the threads, and she reached out to an old contact in the media world, someone who had once worked closely with royal advisors. Within days, the contact confirmed a critical detail. The man orchestrating the smear campaign against Peter was none other than Martin Reynolds, a former aide to Camilla. A year earlier, Reynolds had pitched SEMG a murky sponsorship deal, one Peter had flatly rejected, suspecting it lacked transparency. Stung by the rebuff, Reynolds left Camilla's advisory circle but maintained a close personal connection with her. The final piece had fallen into place. Anne sat in her study, the lamplight casting deep shadows over the fine lines etched by years of experience. She now saw not only Camilla's envy of the public affection Anne enjoyed, but something far more personal. Camilla was avenging her protege. With Camilla's backing, Reynolds had weaponized the scandal both to punish Peter and to undermine Anne's reputation. So, you weren't just guarding your own glory, Anne murmured, her eyes like shards of ice. You wanted to play dirty, did you? She picked up her pen, jotting down every detail she'd gathered. Anne knew she couldn't rush into this. To protect her son and her family's honor, she needed precision. But already, a plan was forming. Camilla had fired the first shot Anne would make sure she did not win. Late on an overcast autumn afternoon at Clarence's house, Princess Anne stepped into a private meeting room where the crystal chandeliers cast a muted glow over the polished oak table. She wore a simple but elegant outfit. The deep blue coat only sharpened her air of resolve. Her eyes, however, were glacial. At the head of the table sat Queen Camilla, fingers interlaced, struggling to maintain composure, though the tension in her gaze betrayed her. No witnesses, no advisors. Just the two most powerful women in the royal family facing each other in a silent duel. Anne wasted no time. She laid the file from Jonathan Wells on the table. The dry thud of paper against wood cut through the stillness. You thought you could go after my son without leaving a trace. Camilla Anne's voice was low, honed to a blade's edge. You weren't just targeting Peter. You were using the royal family's name to shield a man rejected for his own personal greed. Camilla froze, lips pressed tight before she forced a brittle smile. Tilting her head, she tried to reclaim her regal poise. Anne, whatever are you talking about? I've nothing to do with those rumors. The press, well, you know how they are. They make mountains out of molehills, she said softly, her eyes flickering, as though searching for an escape route. Anne didn't flinch. She slid the file towards Camilla. Inside, forensic evidence of doctored documents, all leading back to Martin Reynolds, Camilla's former aide. Don't pretend, Anne said, her voice steady but laced with restrained fury. Martin Reynolds, your trusted man. He pitched a shady deal to Peter. Peter refused. Now, with your backing, he's striking back by blackening my son's name. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Camilla's fingers clenched tighter? She hadn't expected Anne to move this quickly or this decisively. For a moment, she felt stripped bare under Anne's piercing gaze, not of a queen, but a woman cornered. But Camilla would not fold easily. Rising, she walked to the window, turning her back to mask her unease. You think I'll just stand by while you turn from a stiff old workhorse into some sort of national icon? Camilla's voice trembled with anger and envy. The royal family needs a face who can charm the public, not a silent monument casting a shadow over me. Her words were meant to wound, but Anne remained perfectly still. Charm, she repeated, with a note of scorn. Is that what you call slandering my son? Is that what you call abusing your position for personal revenge? Anne stepped closer, locking eyes with Camilla. I have proof, Camilla, every move you and Reynolds made, and I will not let you tear apart my family to protect that hollow glory of yours. Camilla turned, eyes flashing with defiance. But deep down, there was fear. Anne wasn't just a mother defending her child. She was a battle-hardened royal, a fighter who knew how to win without noise. You dare threaten me? Camilla asked, voice trembling, but pride intact. I am the queen, Anne. What do you think you can do? Anne's smile was icy, void of warmth. You'll see, Camilla. You touch my son and I will make you answer for it. Not with your cheap tricks, but with the truth. She turned and left, leaving Camilla standing there, hands trembling in anger and frustration. In the now empty room, Camilla sank into a chair, staring out into the darkening gardens of Buckingham. She knew she had made a dangerous move, and now Anne was not merely an adversary, she was a genuine threat. The crown felt heavier than ever. In his London office, Peter Phillips sat at his desk, surrounded by neatly ordered financial files. After days of relentless work alongside SCMG's accountants and Jonathan Wells, he had a stack of spotless, audited reports before him, proof enough to crush the baseless accusations. More than that, He now had the documents Anne had gathered, exposing Martin Reynolds as the man who doctored and spread the lies, all under the shadow of Camilla's patronage. With his mother's backing, Peter decided he would not allow the scandal to drag on. He would face the public head-on. He arranged a press conference in a modest yet dignified hall in central London. The room was set simply a long table draped in white linen, a large screen behind to display the data. Dressed in a deep navy suit, Peter stood tall, eyes steady, though a trace of tension lingered in his expression. Beside him was Jonathan Wells, ready to walk the press through the financial details. In one corner, Princess Anne stood quietly, arms folded, her gaze filled with pride. She chose not to take the stage. This was Peter's fight, and she trusted his strength to see it through. When the journalists from the Times, the Guardian, and even the Sun, the very paper that had sparked the scandal, settled into their seats, Peter began, "Today I stand before you to address the false allegations made against me and my company. SEMG," he said, his voice low but clear. "I have been accused of embezzling sponsorship funds from international sporting events. These claims are not only untrue, they were manufactured to damage my name." He gestured to Jonathan, who began presenting the financial reports. On the large screen, charts and figures showed that every SEMG transaction was transparent, with not a single irregular payment. Jonathan highlighted the documents that had been deliberately altered to create a false impression, stating, "We have clear evidence that these materials were fabricated with malicious intent." Peter's voice grew firmer as he continued, "I am here not only to defend myself, but to uphold the values my family has always stood for: integrity and responsibility. Those who spread these rumors were not merely attacking me, they were attacking the public's trust in the royal family." He did not name Camilla or Reynolds, but the sharpness in his gaze spoke volumes. The press murmured, camera flashes firing relentlessly, capturing every second. The conference ended with a round of applause from several reporters. In the corner, Anne gave a discreet nod, her eyes shining with silent pride. As she prepared to leave, a Guardian journalist hurried forward, microphone in hand. "Your Royal Highness, what are your thoughts on the matter concerning your son?" Anne paused, turned, her gaze calm yet cutting. "Instead of listening to whispers, I believe in transparency. No one, no matter who they are, has the right to tarnish another's honor simply to preserve a false glory." Her words rang through the hall like a declaration, and for a moment the reporters fell silent before rushing to scribble them down. The statement lit up the media. Major papers ran headlines such as "Peter Phillips clears his name with facts" and "Royal honor defended." On social media, hashtags like #StandWithPeter and #StandWithAnne dominated the trends, with thousands expressing their support. "Peter and Anne are proof of true integrity." One user wrote, "Someone tried to play dirty, but the truth always wins." Public opinion, long fatigued by royal drama, shifted from suspicion to admiration. Peter was no longer seen as just a businessman. He was a man who had stood up to injustice. And Anne, the steadfast mother, had proven she would protect her son to the end. At Clarence House, Camilla watched the press conference on television, her grip on her wineglass so tight her knuckles turned white. Every word Peter spoke, every proud glance from Anne, felt like a blade to her pride. The scandal she had hoped would undermine Anne had backfired, restoring Peter's reputation and elevating Anne's standing in the public eye. Isolation closed in, and it felt as though the walls of power she had built were beginning to crumble. "They've won," she muttered, staring blankly into the darkened Buckingham Gardens. But deep down, she knew this battle was far from over, and she would not surrender easily. Buckingham Palace, usually still and solemn, was heavy with tension. In the wake of Peter's successful press conference, the public furore refused to die down. But behind the scenes, another storm was gathering. With the determination of a mother and the steel of a royal warrior, Anne wasn't content with merely clearing her son's name. She gathered every piece of evidence from SEMG's spotless accounts to the documents linking Martin Reynolds to the smear campaign into a meticulously prepared dossier and sent it straight to King Charles III. Charles, though in poor health, could not ignore the gravity of the matter. From his sickbed at Sandringham, he ordered an emergency closed-door meeting at Buckingham. The guest list was short: Prince William, Queen Camilla, Anne, and the two most senior advisors to the royal household. They convened in a dimly lit chamber, its dark wood paneling and crystal chandeliers lending a solemn weight to the air. The tension was so thick, the ticking of the old clock seemed the only sound. At the head of the table by him, Charles looked tired but retained the dignity of a king. He held Anne's dossier, each page neatly marked, his eyes scanning the irrefutable evidence. His voice was weak but laced with authority. "It's clear enough. But this is not merely a private matter. It strikes at the public's trust in the royal family." He turned to Camilla, his gaze sharper than usual. "Camilla, have you anything to say?" Across from him, Camilla felt her pulse quicken. She tried to hold her composure, fingers laced tightly before her, but her eyes betrayed her unease. "Charles, I was not directly involved in this," she said, her voice carefully measured. "Martin Reynolds acted on his own. If there was wrongdoing, it was his, not mine." But her words fell thin, dry as a dead leaf in the wind. Crown Prince William, seated beside his father, didn't allow Camilla to continue. Leaning forward, his gaze steady and unflinching. "He spoke, Your Majesty," William said, his voice low but cutting, "whether or not you gave the direct order. Martin Reynolds was once your close advisor. This has done serious damage to the reputation of the royal family. The public is questioning our transparency." He paused, locking eyes with Camilla. "I suggest you refrain from making any public statements and limit your contact with the outside world until we have resolved this. We cannot allow this scandal to drag on." William's words hit Camilla like a heavy blow. Her eyes widened as she realized that not only Charles, but the heir to the throne himself, was no longer in her corner. "William, what are you saying?" she asked, her voice trembling with desperation. "I am the Queen. You cannot treat me like a criminal." But William didn't waver, his eyes resolute as though he had prepared for this confrontation long before. "This is not a punishment, Your Majesty," he replied. "This is to protect the royal family." From her seat in the corner, Anne observed in silence, her gaze fixed on Camilla, a wordless challenge in her eyes. They held not just resilience, but pride. She had defended her son, and now she was watching Camilla face the consequences of her own scheming. Anne didn't need to speak. Her silence was more powerful than any speech. Camilla felt humiliation settle over her like heavy cloak. She looked to Charles, hoping for a flicker of support, but he only bowed his head and rubbed his temples in exhaustion. "Camilla, do as William says," Charles murmured, his tone low and weary. "We need time to manage this." Those words were the final blow. In that moment, Camilla, Queen of the United Kingdom, was reduced to a faint shadow within the very halls of power she once thought she commanded. When the meeting ended, Anne rose, leaving the room with her usual composure. As she passed Camilla, she paused just for a heartbeat. Their eyes met. In Anne's gaze, Camilla saw not only victory, but a warning she would never forgive anyone who dared to threaten her family. Camilla pressed her lips together and turned away, her heart heavy with bitterness. She still wore the crown, but for the first time it felt meaningless. In the quiet of her study at Clarence's house, the weak autumn light fell across Camilla's face. She sat motionless, hands resting on the oak desk. On top lay the Times, with a bold headline, "Princess Anne, the silent pillar of the royal family." The front page photograph showed Anne, simply dressed yet exuding quiet strength, standing beside Peter at a charity event. No crown, no flowery speeches, yet she had become a national emblem of integrity and resolve. Camilla's fingers trembled as they brushed the paper. as if tempted to tear it apart, but she didn't. Instead, she sat there, letting bitterness gnaw at the edges of her soul. The memory of the Buckingham meeting still haunted her. William's recommendation that she be silenced from public comment and have her communications monitored was like an invisible sentence. Camilla, Queen of the United Kingdom, was now restricted, sidelined within the very palace she once believed was her stage. Her husband no longer had the strength to defend her. The heir had chosen to stand with Anne's truth, rather than shield her. She felt utterly isolated. The crown on her head was now nothing more than a heavy, cold ornament. Deep in her heart, a quiet, seething hatred took root. She muttered, barely audible, "I will never forget this. You will all pay." But her venomous vow echoed only in the empty room. Meanwhile, at a charity event in Gloucestershire, Anne appeared alongside Peter, drawing every gaze in the room. The fundraiser, aimed at helping disadvantaged children, was an annual affair, but today, the press swarmed, cameras flashing, lenses trained on mother and son. Peter, composed in a navy suit, held Harriet's hand, his radiant smile scattering the last shadows of the recent scandal. Beside him, Anne stood in an elegant gray coat, her calm gaze radiating an unshakable strength. She didn't need long speeches or grand displays. Her very presence spoke for itself. Reporters pressed in, asking about the scandal and Peter's vindication. Anne only gave a faint smile and answered briefly, "Today we are here for the children, not for old stories." Her poise only deepened the crowd's admiration. Standing beside Dupin, Peter looked at her with gratitude. "Mum, I don't know what I would have done without you," he said as they left the event. The setting sun cast a warm golden glow over them both. Anne gently patted her son's shoulder. "I'll always be here, Peter," she said softly. "No one can harm you without answering to me." It was more than a mother's promise. It was a quiet declaration of war against anyone who dared challenge her family. As Anne and Peter departed to the respect of the public, Camilla sat in her darkening study, her expression shadowed. She still wore the crown, but now she was an isolated queen, forgotten within her own palace. Her grudge against Anne ran deep, but this time she knew she had lost a major battle. Anne, with her integrity and resilience, had not only shielded her son, but cemented her place as an irreplaceable pillar of the royal family.